Good morning. Welcome to the Burton Wires live stream on Blacks in Academia, Navigating the Explosive Terrain. I am your host, Dr. Nsenga Burton. I'm actually a professor, in addition to the founder and editor-in-chief of the Burton Wire, which is a member of the NNPA Black Press USA Distribution Network. With me, I have two of my favorite people. That would be Professor Phill Branch, who is a filmmaker and a professor of practice at Goucher College. And of course, Dr. Mark Cunningham, who is an associate professor at Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. Thank you for joining me today, fellas.
Good
to
Hey,
be here.
Yes. All right. Well, we haven't done this in quite a while. We had a little bit of a respite. We've been taking that self-care piece to heart. And although people think academics are on the beach in the summer, we're actually drilling down and writing a lot and doing research. So we're coming up for air to have this much needed conversation around these hot topics. I would call them hot topics because, academia usually resides in the Chronicle and diversity issues in education and places like that. But these topics have transgressed those boundaries and have become part of the popular discourse and discussions around Blacks in academia. So let's get started talking about Ms. Nikole Hanna Jones and her journey from UNC Chapel Hill, of which she is an illustrious alum, to the Mecca, an illustrious HBCU that is in Washington, D.C., for those of you who have been living under a rock. Okay, so, and just to give you just a little bit of background, and then I'm going to let you jump in. Nikole Hanna Jones, many of you know her from the 1619 Project, which was done at the New York Times. She's been doing this type of work in terms of engaging and doing investigative research on issues of race, class, gender, what have you. And of course, this project was monumental. She is a Pulitzer Prize winner. She is a MacArthur Genius Grant winner. She is a Peabody Award winner. And she is an actual alum of the J School at UNC. We're not going to say that gentleman's name because he's just so mean and cruel. Mm-hmm. But of the J School, which is actually a fantastic journalism school that is located at UNC Chapel Hill. And so she was supposed to become the night chair. And for those who don't know, getting a night chair at a it's really hard to do, A. B, at an illustrious journalism school is really a great accomplishment. And C, even though she does not have a Ph.D., because I've been seeing those rumblings around, the night chair is not based on academic credentials. It's based on your credentials in the field, which you bring into the academic space in order to create journalists who are in touch with how the real world works and to help them do better, in most cases, investigative journalism. Right. So that is why she had that position. And because of the type of work that journalists do, I almost wore my Support Black Journalists shirt today. That's weird. But to support the type of work that she does and that people like her do, not only in the field, but also in academia, like us, they are granted tenure so that they can have academic freedom. To do projects like a 1619 project, to continue that type of very important work where you explore really systemic racism and its foundation in the creation of our country. So that is what typically happens at night chairs that are everywhere. University of Miami, Northwestern University, University of Georgia. When you have night chairs, they're typically granted tenure, which is something that's typically mostly for academics, other than in these cases, because of the nature of the work in which they're doing, and the blowback that can happen. But before she could even assume, her much celebrated position, they, in an act of what I call prevenge, I learned that from Living Single, Max. But in an act of prevenge, they denied her tenure. And although she was quietly going to accept that, if you read her 8-page letter, which you should absolutely read in full detail, not only did they deny her tenure, they maligned her, and then leaked, and I will say conservatives leaked that she was not going to be tenured because they didn't even think she should be hired.
Right.
And then that's how the controversy began. But what has come up with what has happened to her is not only what happens to Black people who try to participate in institutions that are also part of systemic racism, but also Black academics who actually have to exist in these institutions, whether or not they are a MacArthur Grant winner, whether or not they are a star or a star in the field or public intellectual of some note. So anyway, that is the background for people who have not been following this story, but it is an important one because it raises all kinds of issues. Mark, let's start with you, Dr. Cunningham.
Yeah, I was, to be honest with you, when I first read it, even, in these situations when you see them happen like this, you're not surprised, right, that something like that would happen. But I was still stunned nonetheless. I mean, the 1619 Project is incredibly important. It was incredibly influential. Everybody's been touting it, from Spike Lee wearing the hats to, it's been just completely, just in our mainstream culture, and just really kind of setting apart this kind of discussion of where we need to kind of be talking about where race is concerned. And for her not to get, for this to happen to her with tenure and all this other stuff, something that really should have been guaranteed. And I think it's important to note too, that she had the support of the people in the department. She had the support of the students or whatever else. It was the board of directors, right, that felt the need because of critical race theory, particularly that one guy, like you said, who's like Voldemort, we won't name him. But right,
Candyman himself.
Right. That didn't want her to have, this job because of the way he felt about critical race theory. And it was just an embarrassment is what I thought it was. Embarrassment.
Yeah, I mean, highly embarrassing. Phill?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I, like everyone else, thought this was a bad look. I think it was symbolic of what we see, again, like you said, in professors and friends that we have, colleagues we have, who are not rock stars per se, who have had to deal with this sort of thing. But I would say the one thing that I, among in private conversations, which I think was important, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about this today, was having the conversation about what does it really mean to be someplace where you're valued. I mean, we were having that conversation before that letter came out and trying to think about where exactly do we fit in and what is the kind of treatment we should expect and how should we, on some level, how should we be treating ourselves, right? And I think a lot of that conversation is what's happening, because it's not a one-sided conversation about the bad guy who is treating us one kind of way. It's also about what do we now have to do for ourselves, because now the issue's out there. What are we now doing for ourselves? We can't keep trying to fit into this box that wasn't created for us to fit in. So what do we do now to kind of think through what is our place in these spaces? What are our places? Because there are multiple places for us to be.
Absolutely. And thank you, Charlie, for the comment that we're having great information, and welcome to everyone who's joining. And please send us questions or comments, because we definitely want to engage with you as well. But yeah, exactly, right? This is just a microcosm of what happens to Black people holistically throughout in the work country, certainly, but throughout the world. And it's this idea of doing everything you're supposed to do. This is why I loved Hanna Jones's comments, her interview, where she said, I wear my hair the way I want to wear it because it doesn't matter. You can have all the accolades, you can have all of the credentials, you can be smart, you can be faster, you can be all of those things. But it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, there's someone who is more empowered than you, who still sees you as, that N-word from, wherever you're from, who has somehow been given this opportunity and they haven't earned it. I mean, you can do all kinds of work. I mean, you can hold her credentials up to others who are in the department. They have a fantastic department, so there's no shade to them at all, the professors who actually work in there. But, they're very few. I mean, in any of these schools who actually have those credentials in journalism. To be, the idea that she's not qualified to be or to hold tenure, and she's an alum. They created her, right? They created her. That's what we do. In academia, for those of you who are not in academia, one of the things that we do, it's very territorial, but it is true, right? So if you go to USC, there'll be like Nsenga, she got her Ph.D. at USC, we trained her. You go to Howard University. You got your PhD at Howard. We trained her. It's a very kind of right, territorial ownership type of thing, right? You are you because we gave you the knowledge and taught you how to think critically and engage material in a way that sets you apart from others out there, right? So they trained her to do this kind of work, and then they punish her for it. I mean, it's just outrageous.
Yeah.
It is outrageous. And I mean, going back to your point about, that how it happens across the board and in different fields. And I mean, just to localize it for me, as you see going across the bottom of the screen, I'm a professor of practice, right? The reason why I'm that and not an assistant professor is that I am not a rock star and everyone's not writing about my choices and what position I took at Goucher College. But the truth is, I was given a choice. Between assistant professor, tenure track, and professor of practice. And those two positions are different in various ways, but professor of practice is not a tenure position. And I chose professor of practice, and there's a reason for that. It wasn't because I don't think I have qualifications. It's because I think I have more than enough right now. And I just felt like I didn't need anyone else who I don't know their qualifications, feeling like they can decide whether or not I have value, because I already know that I have it. So I chose a position that allowed me to also date them in the way that they're dating me, right? We both have options. And I think Goucher has been really fair and good to me, but I like the control of saying, the same way Nikole Hanna Jones was asked to be somewhere because of what she has to offer. I feel like in my own world, you've seen my CV, I'm not pledging, I'm not hazing to prove to you that I am worthy of a thing. If you don't see it, you don't see it. Then we can all have other options in other places. That was my effort in taking back control. I made a choice. I don't want to be on your track because I don't want it, right? And it's not just at Goucher. I didn't want it at Hampton, and I didn't want it anyplace else because I don't necessarily agree with the way that tenure is done. But I know that's not the case for everybody else. And I think some of it is about people stopping you, but some of it is also about maintaining some control over the space you have control over in some ways. And it's not for everybody. And not to say that there isn't still a problem with that, but you have to have some understanding about I'm not going to play your particular game, at least not in this way. I play other ones. I'm not going to play this one.
Absolutely, Phill. And Phill is actually a graduate of Hampton University as well, so an alum. And I actually have taught at two HBCUs, Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina, Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, Georgia. I did a lot of work with Howard University's middle school and worked with their students mostly there, as well as other projects at Howard. So I'm very familiar with that space as well. And so what you're saying is not unusual. And I also want us to talk about this whole idea that, HBCUs are a refuge for Black faculty. Having taught at HBCUs, some of us have been educated at HBCUs, which is what many saw with what happened with Nikole Hanna Jones. And, who basically was like, listen, I have options. This is what Phill is talking about. And that's the other thing, Phill. I think at mainstream institutions, they never think you have options as a Black faculty. Right. So we're going to bring you here. You've, given up your job at the New York Times. You moved your family. You've leased your apartment or bought this house or whatever. And so we're going to wait till you get here. And you're almost ready to start. And then say, by the way, we're not going to give you tenure, even though we told you we were, and everybody else before you has gotten it. So, I mean, here's a 5-year contract. That should be okay. Not thinking that someone of her status and of her accomplishments, with all of the things behind her, would have other opportunities. The same with you, Phill. I would say the same with me. I'm a currently professor. I'm a senior lecturer at Emory. I've been a tenured professor before. Assistant professor at Goucher, and a full professor at Clark Atlanta University. And I made the same decision as you for very specific reasons. But, this idea that academia is so different in these spaces is really not true. It is a system that is often replicated in all of these spaces. And even though you may not have racism at HBCU, you damn sure got some sexism going on and some heterosexism and some homophobia, and we can keep going in some of our illustrious institutions. Doesn't make them worse off. Please don't come with the, oh my God, you bashed HBCUs. What I'm saying is the same, and I'm not talking about y'all, I'm talking about commoners. I'm saying is that some of the things that I see in the public space that are being lobbed onto primarily white institutions, PWIs, as if it doesn't exist at Black institutions and minority serving institutions, it's just simply false. It's not true. It's part of a larger system of academia.
I think it feeds into a narrative also too that we have. But can I back up for a little bit and say something about Phil's comment about the choice of, one of the things I wanted to kind of speak to and this is not just exclusive to me as a Black, at the time as a Black PhD candidate or coming out of UT as a PhD. This was my entire cohort. But speaking as a Black professor now, there are ways that I didn't understand the tenure process when I came out of my graduate program. I didn't understand how it worked. I didn't understand. There was so much I didn't understand and so much I wasn't prepared for. It was almost like on-the-job training once I got out into the field. And I graduated at a time when the bottom kind of fell out of the higher ed industry, and I wasn't able to secure a tenure track position. Try as I might, right? Because that's the only thing you actually heard was going to an R1, go to an R1, go to R1. I didn't think about doing anything else. And it wasn't until I was kind of forced in the position to kind of look at everything, because I taught public school for 18 years and was an adjunct professor at Austin Community College for 9 years, while I was teaching public ed, hustling, trying to make it happen. And then I ended up getting a full-time job at ACC, at the community college. And I'm very happy there. I mean, I feel like you feel, I have, I'm teaching 4 and 4, but nonetheless, I'm still doing research. I'm still writing. I'm still doing all of these other things without that added pressure. They treat me well. They pay me well, considering. And, like you say, it was an option, but those are things that don't get told to you when you are navigating that terrain. And I think that's a detriment as a Black person trying to navigate these kind of, this terrain of academia where you're not equipped with certain knowledge, where you don't have a parent that was a professor or whatever, that can tell you these things. And I really did go through a position too as well, where I felt like I got a lot of support and mentorship when I was a student, but once I got in the field, I didn't receive that as much. And I've been very blessed. Like, I mean, and this is really interesting. You were talking about gender. Nsenga, I was very blessed. Like, it seemed like the brothers, when I was a student, the brothers supported me more. But now that I'm out in the field working, it's the sisters that have really, like, as Dr. Bess, Bretta Smith took me under her wing and has shown me everything I need to know. I mean, this was stuff that I was thinking like, wow, if someone had told me that when I was a student, I may have been a little bit better prepared to get out of here. And Dr. Bess even said, boy, you don't know that. You need to know this, and but it's been helpful. But but like you say, Phill, when you're not a rock star, that's what you're up against. And it's difficult. It's very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just a shout out Dr. Beretta Smith-Shomade, who has been a mentor for many, many students, Black PhD students, including myself. She's a current associate professor of film, television at Emory University Media Studies. She's amazing. And that is the type of mentorship you need once you get into the field, because you really don't know. Dr. Nikole Gaines, who's actually the current co-chair of the Black Caucus of the Society of Cinema and Media Studies, wrote a post on Facebook the other day talking about how there needs to be a lot of help for people who, especially Black students, coming out of these doctoral programs, graduating out of these PhD programs, to have some type of guidance and professionalization so that they understand the difference between a tenure track and professor practice and all of that, and how many courses you really should be teaching. And no, you should not be chair of your department if you don't have tenure. And all of these things that you just kind of learn on the job, so to speak, where you just like, oh yeah, oh, and I should be getting the salary. Oh, and I should be getting this course release. Oh, and I can get this. Oh, and these resources are available. A lot of times we have really difficult journeys because we don't really know what the path should be, and we don't know what resources are available. And because people underestimate you. This is across the board. They assume that you're going to get in, you're going to get this job, and you're going to stay forever. But those days of teaching for 40 or 50 years at one institution are pretty much over. You can really chart your course. I've done it. And really chart your course and decide where you want to go and what contributions you want to make and how long you want to stay. If, as you say, as Phill says, you believe and value what you do, regardless of how they feel about you.
Right.
And I think that's what the Hannah Jones case, and I would argue the Cornel West case, Dr.
Yeah.
West case, is a reflection of those things, right? What are your feelings on Cornel West? What are y'all thinking on that?
I told you, I was surprised he didn't have tenure. I honestly was. I mean, like you say, the contributions that, you know, this brother has made to the field of academic, you know, just of scholarship and academia is, you know, it's largely unparalleled in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
And for him to have these similar struggles, is really, really telling. It's very telling. So,
right.
Like, and I always feel like if Cornel West is having these struggles, then what is Dr. Cunningham?
The same.
God have mercy.
Right. What are folks who are just out here trying to make a living? You know, I used to have a professor, Dr. Todd Boyd, who used to say some of these folks are out here playing at this stuff. And he was talking about wealthy faculty members who come from wealth, while others of us are trying to make a living at it. And so I adopted that phrase because I said, that is so true, right? What happens when you're just a regular old Black girl from Virginia? That's me, a regular old Black girl from Virginia. And you catch the wave and you're like, oh my God, I love all this knowledge and thinking and creating and all of this stuff. And you don't have any role models in that particular space. And you don't have someone looking out for you. What then happens? Phill, I can tell you want to say something.
I mean, I'm going to get canceled, but you know, I just think I came into academia in a different angle. I was not seeking it in the same way, right? It was a choice I made when I moved, and I decided to look at the opportunities at Hampton University. It was a great opportunity. I knew people there. It was a great opportunity to work in the English department and work with some film things. But what I'm hearing it too is like, you know, I look around and I know you guys do. I look around and pay attention to what's happening, right? I don't know this space. I was working in film and television and marketing. So now I'm in this new space. Let me pay attention. So I spent the year paying attention and listening, right? And I remember sitting at a meeting one time with some people who I really respect, some professors who I had looked up to, and they were in a meeting. They gave us this binder of things we needed to do to get tenure if we want to take our career seriously. Mm-hmm. And I understood what they were doing. It was sort of like a training thing that they were trying to do for new faculty. But I asked a question that silenced the room and then it made people mad. And it was just like, but why are we doing this? And then they were looking at me like, well, it's because this is what you're supposed to do. And I said, why? What for? And I understand academic freedom and all that stuff. So they start saying academic freedom, blah, blah, blah. I said, we don't have, well, I shouldn't even say that. We don't necessarily have that here in this space, right? Mm-hmm. So you want me to do all this to not have this thing you're talking about, right? What else you got? And then it was like, there's a bump in salary. How much? Nobody wanted to say it. Then eventually someone said it. It's like, I can make that much if I work a summer job this summer and add it to my salary. What else we got, right? We're in this building that hasn't been updated. You know, we're driving old cars, working for a year. Like, what are we fighting for? Like, you're going to talk to us as young faculty. Don't lead us into the same wasteland that you are in. So let's talk about what it takes to get there and what it should look like in the future. What should we be fighting for? And that's the part that isn't there. So we start coming in and doing the same things that everybody's done, writing papers that we wouldn't even want to read to get published somewhere in many cases. And then you get this job in this office in the corner, and then you're doing this thing. And for some people, it's just this cycle of, well, like you said, Dr. Cunningham, people didn't know. They just fell into a lane and didn't ask questions, critical questions. And once we start asking those questions, I think at certain institutions, it's like, yeah, what are we doing this for? And how can we change this to make it actually more valuable and more impactful? And is there another way? And I think oftentimes you're not allowed to ask these questions. Me just simply asking why sent the room into a tizzy. Because you're not supposed to ask why, you're supposed to do it, you know. And you know,
very biblical, right? Don't ask questions, just do it.
Don't ask questions, just do it. No, I'm not doing that. Why? Tell me why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you raised some really critical points, and I think that was raised in the open letter written to Professor Nikole Hannah Jones. I think it was raised in that open letter that was written by initially by someone named Imani Light, which we have now found out is a pseudonym for many of the lecturers who actually work at Howard and who have been really fighting to organize and to unionize and to get better conditions. And the conditions that they were talking about in the letter are actually standard conditions that are throughout academia. It's not, just Howard. So some of the things they were talking about was heavy course loads, lack of resources, not having contracts on time. You have to reapply for contracts every year, which is unusual with lecturers.
Your time limits at the university.
They have the time limits. Just lots of challenges. Hard, and it's hard to work your way out of those types of positions because you do so much teaching. It's hard to do teaching and research.
Yeah.
There are some juggernauts who can do that. Like they can teach 4 or 5 classes and write a book. But most people, they have that kind of energy, that mental focus, and the ability to kind of shift between those two worlds because they're very different, even though they're connected.
Yeah.
Ways in which you do those things.
Difficult it is.
Yes, and so they raise those issues, which I think Phill, which your comments speak to, right? This idea of what are we working for? Like if Cornel West doesn't have tenure,
right,
at the end of his career, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people think of Cornel West as a public figure. They don't think of him as foundational academic scholar on areas of race and religion and class. Socioeconomics, and just lots of different areas, African American studies. But he is in academia, top, at the top. He is iconic. He's legendary in academia. So despite what you might think about him outside of that and what he represents outside of that as a public figure within the community, even and especially within the African American community, he is someone who is regarded and well respected, and outside of it, right? For his work and the contributions that he's made. So to your point, if Cornel West is still fighting at his age to get the respect that he has earned in the space, and I know, one of my mentors, Dr. Robin D.G. Kelly, wrote an amazing letter in support of, and in the letter he said, I can't believe I'm writing this letter to speak about how important Dr. West's work is to the actual field of Africana studies. When we think about systemic racism, when we think about all of these things that are buzzing now, he's been doing this work for the better part of 50 years. So it's just fascinating that if someone like a Cornel West, who's from inside of the academy, and then you have someone who's external to the academy, are having a Hanna, a Nikole Hanna Jones, and who is as just illustrious as she is. I keep saying illustrious because I can't think of a better word, but just the tremendous value, just a conversation with her between her and the student can I know for a fact change your life. It can just make somebody just go from wherever they are through the stratosphere. They cannot just get into a position that they've earned, and with the support and respect that they've earned, what does it mean for
but that's the danger of it, though, to me, Nsenga. But even the way that we're talking about them, and they deserve every adjective we can give them to kind of describe their work and whatever else. But I think about friends of mine, for example, who have sent me messages and say, "Oh, did you read Dr. West's letter? Did you see what happened to Nikole Hanna Jones? This is terrible." And yet, at the same time, those are the same people who will devalue my Ph.D., right? By telling me, just because you got that Ph.D. and you got this job, I've been doing this for all this long, and my experience don't mean anything. And blah, blah. These are the same people who think it's a travesty, right? Of what's happened to Dr. West and what's happened to Nikole Hanna Jones, and all those same people that think it's a travesty will turn around and say to me, not the rock star working at ACC, whatever else, "Oh, well, I'm just talented, just this, blah blah blah." That devaluing, and then to what degree can we expect even Nikole Hanna Jones, Dr. West, or whatever else? I mean, I'm not talking about, but I'm just saying that they're going to stick their neck out to be in support of these other Black professors that have written that letter to her and saying like, hey, we struggling out here, right? What degree can we even expect? And I think that's some of the whole thing. We're kind of caught up in this whole thing, right? As you know, because of everything that's going on in the world, that if you just align yourself with what is Black, right, then you're gonna be all right. You'll be protected. You'll be taken care of. And we know that's not the case. We know that's right. I mean, there's been so many situations. Like, anyway, okay, because I was
Right.
I really was. I was about to say something.
Yeah, say it.
I know. This is a safe space, although it's being broadcast to millions of people.
I tell you,
go ahead, baby. Get it off your chest. Get it off your chest.
I'll just say that my journey has been such, right, that the very brothers and stuff that I thought, I'm not saying tell somebody to give me a job, but would help, would kind of put me in right position. That didn't happen. That did not happen. It was a very much so a case of, it just feels so much like I'm doing my thing. You need to try to make it, you got the equipment. You need to try to make it happen yourself, right? And so it's almost like this blue collar. My friend Maisha, Dr. Maisha Akbar, she teaches at Fort Valley State in Georgia. She say, college, where you literally everything you work for, because but this whole idea that Black people come together and that it is so cliquish. I mean, Nsenga, I've talked to you about this before. You have these instances where even within, with amongst us as Black people, they've clicked off, right? And if you're not moving in the same direction or talking the same speak they talking, or you're not moving in the same circles, and you don't get hooked up with certain stuff, and they don't fool with you. They don't talk to you. I mean, they'll friend you on Facebook and just to say, oh, I know so and so because I met you at SCMS or whatever. But they don't fool with you like that.
Right. No, you're right.
Yeah, they don't connect with you like that. I got off.
And Michelle Gibson, before you speak, Phill, asked the question. So, is the problem a community cultural problem? Like, is the problem us, or is it the instant? Well, that's not what she's asking. She's asking, is the problem us? I'm asking, is the problem us, or is it the institution, or is it both? Phill.
To answer that, I would say that, of course, we are always part of, it's a communication, it's an interaction, it's a relationship. So we are always part of the situation, right? Mm-hmm. So we like I said before, it is not just the bad guy who's doing a thing. It is the bad guy, it's the good guy, and it's how the relationship between those two parties, right? What's in the middle? How do we meet? How are we treating ourselves? How are we treating each other? So it is both, right?
Right.
And what I was going to say kind of speaks to that is that as a faculty member at Howard, what I will say is at one time was that, I've been in those meetings where people are just asking for basic resources, basic copies, right? Mm-hmm. I've been in those meetings where people were dejected because it was that 6th year and they knew that they were gone and had spent 6 years there, and they were gone at the end of the next year and didn't have a job, and what that felt like. I saw that happen to people, and it doesn't feel good. I've been in a meeting where someone talked about, we need to do something about this. There are people here contributing, doing amazing things. What can we do? But everybody's overworked, right? Everybody's overworked and doing their own thing, and everyone's exhausted and feels like there's no way to win against the system. That's how people feel against all kinds of systems. And I've been in a room where someone has said from a position of power, well, they let Tony go. I don't know if they're going to fight to keep you. And it's funny. It's a chuckle. It's a chuckle for some people in the room.
Morrison, right?
Yeah. Like people chuckle at that in the room, but that's not funny, right? Because what it's saying is, I'll see you later. You out of here. And it's like, so why am I working this hard if I know that you're just going to let me go? And I think that we see that play out at all kind of institutions where that adjunct lecturer label and sometimes the assistant professor labor is exploited. It is not unique to Howard. It is not unique to PWIs treating women or people of color. It is across the board. And now I'll tell a brief story that kind of symbolizes, and I think there's the systemic piece, it's the exhaustion, it's cultural, and then it's also, when I talk about the individual aspect of it, it's like, I think that where do we fit in, what do we do thing has to start somewhere. My first day and I won't say which institution, but my first day at one of these institutions, I showed up and the secretary took me down to the basement where there was a cubicles, for about 20 people. There were 2 that were open, right? One had a puddle in it, but it was by a window. One had about 10 old computers stacked up, and it said, you get the light right here with the water on the wires, or you can have the drier side, but you have to clean out this cubicle. And I'm thinking, I don't want none of this, right? And I took the dry cubicles. I chose not to be electrocuted by the cords. But then I was just like, I was mad at the system that would allow someone to bring me down to a wet basement and say I can have this room. But I was also mad at the people who were sitting there typing in this cubicle that smelled like mold. And I was just like, y'all just sitting here. So at once I'm doing 2 things, system and what's wrong with y'all, right? Shout out to my colleagues. It's not personal. I know some of y'all may be watching, but I was thinking, no way. I put my bag down. There was a place to set my bag. And I was out of there. I was out of that office because you could do a lot of things to me, but you're gonna not let me sit on top of cords plugged into water, right? And I think if you keep doing that to people and they keep taking it, right? And you come in every day and you have to wear rain boots to get to your desk. How do you fight, right? You're tired. They don't even care if you get electrocuted. How are you fighting for even greater things, right? You're worn down. Right? I shouldn't have had to put in a special request for an office that didn't have mold and I didn't need to wear rain boots, but I had to fight for that. I got it because I asked and I wasn't going to sit there regardless, right? But if you're starting there, how am I asking for other stuff? I'm starting, like, how do you do that? It's crazy.
Look, that is not at Goucher College. You have a beautiful office.
No, that's not at Goucher. Goucher, the room was dry.
I got to say that out loud because Goucher's my office.
The room was dry. The sunshine came in. The rainbows came through the window.
But I think about that in terms of like even service too. Like they'll let you serve to death, but we as Black people, right? We know not historically, right, but statistically, right? We overserve, right? Because we don't want to look like we're not being a team player, that we're not contributing, or whatever. But see, Phill, Phill, I'm listening to you talking, and I think that's cool for you, whatever. But I don't think that's everybody feels like. I don't think everybody.
I don't think you should. I don't think everybody should. But I'm saying
feels like they can do that.
Yeah.
Well, I think you can push back. So what Phill is saying, because my first job, and I love my first job. Which was at JCSU. I remember, and he's a great friend of mine. I won't say his name, but he was chair of the department, and he gave me my office, and it was a broom closet, and it had no windows or anything. And I said, and he tells the story like if you meet him, you'll say he's a Howard alum, and he tells the story like fresh out. I hadn't even finished my Ph.D. yet, and I was like, oh, surely you jest. This is not going to be my office. And so, eventually I got my own office. So I get what you're saying, Phill, in terms of having to push back. I think some of that is personality. But I also think when you are in the academic space and you're going through all of those, trying to cross all those hurdles, you are really, and this is a different conversation, socialized to really go along with in order to get to where you need to go. Academia seems like a safe space because they'll be like all beautiful and stuff. Like you go to they had a historic building, it was wonderful. Just the architecture on the campus was great. And so, things like that mattered, like beautification, architecture, things of that nature. So, the environment, even if you're, when you get to your office, you're like, is this a broom closet? Is this mold? Like, what is this? There is the illusion that something fantastic is happening or it's beautiful and it's a place of beauty, especially on the PWIs, right? The campuses are just, gorgeous, breathtaking, or what have you. But the horror that is happening inside the walls to some faculty members is a problem. And so you have, we have Black faculty members who are talking right now. Michelle Gibson says she believes there's an overall devaluation of education and education.
I agree with her.
And I think we all agree with that. Donna Hill says we're disposable. Assistant professors, adjuncts get the side eye, and I'm at a PBI, which is an HBCU, primarily Black institution. I was at, Michelle Gibson says, I was at a PW higher ed and they let all lecturers go without warning. That happens a lot, right? When that money gets tight, you got to go.
Yeah.
Right? And even in COVID, the way that colleges and universities have used COVID as an excuse to not give raises that were earned before COVID, to not allow faculty, students, and staff mental health space to try to replicate. And this is a problem I have across the board with lots of organizations, but especially academic ones. This idea that you can replicate this experience under these kinds of, especially if you're Black and brown, as it relates to the numbers of COVID and COVID deaths, but replicate these types of academic experiences under the type of duress and stress that many people are facing, particularly those who come from economically disenfranchised backgrounds, historically economic disenfranchised backgrounds. You know, like I had a student who was signing on from a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot because she didn't have Wi-Fi at home, and she had siblings at home, and her father was sick from COVID. Her mother was later would get sick. She was working at Amazon to try to bring in money. I mean, just all sorts of stuff going on. And the fact that we're trying to pretend that this is normal or normative is, to me, like a big indicator of the problem with academia. It is an unwillingness to adjust. It is an unwillingness to court and to value people like a Phill Branch, who isn't necessarily a traditional academic, but is here nonetheless. It is an unwillingness to help people like, you know, Mark and myself to better navigate these precarious spaces, and to really train us to really fight for everything, right? In our words, right? But then when you get on campus, you better not try to form a union. You better not ask for better wages. You better not ask for that raise you're supposed to get. You better not ask for that tenure track job that they're about to give to somebody else and you're sitting right in front of them. Like, you know, all of these things that we have to deal with in academia. And it's not specific to Blacks, not all of them. A lot of them is just across the board. But then when you add that layer of racism or sexism or homophobia or whatever, you know, onto these particular issues, then it becomes something different. And I think that even the fact that these issues have made it into the popular discussion, right? Because we've been having these conversations. How long have we been having these conversations, fellas? How long?
Yeah, like
Entire career.
Entire career. I'm going into year 21.
I started this mix.
Right. August 16th is 21 years teaching. I'm starting year 21. We've been having these same conversations. The same things have been happening to people who aren't stars or who aren't celebrities. And no shade to them, because, you know, I don't knock anybody's hustle. Get your money.
Get in your bag.
What?
Get in your bag.
In America and you live past 18, you should get whatever you want.
Get in your bag.
Including they should get rid of student loans for academics, but that's something else. Because in addition to being underpaid, you got to pay your student loans back.
You got to pay your student loans.
Education you got, wherever you got it from, whether it's University of Phoenix, whether it is a community college, whatever school, you have to pay that back. So even if you're not making any money, or you're being suppressed, your salaries are being suppressed, or you are teaching so many classes that you can't even get your side hustle, then you know, what are you to do? And I think that what is happening is that people have that, what I call that TV version of academia, right? And the reality of academia, and layered onto that, is systemic racism and all the other things that we have to work on or deal with as Black people in this country. And so that is a major, major issue.
So do we think the response from Amani Light in that open letter, do we think that the expectation that there be solidarity is fair? Is that putting an extra burden on to this woman, to Nikole, who is starting a new place, trying to rebalance and kind of get her feet sort of steadied? Do you think it's a fair response to kind of include her in that? And also, what would progress look like on this, you know, as we move forward? What would progress be?
Bro, I think in some ways, I could see where it wouldn't be unfair, but in some ways, I think it is fair. Because some of the reasons she got the traction she got is because she had the support of all these people, right, rallying behind her, people she didn't even know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because it became such a widespread issue. I mean, it is this case, right, where, you know, does she get in this position and then just, okay, well, I'm done. I went to HBCU. I made it. I'm finished. I don't have to do anything else. And I don't know, to some degree, maybe there is some responsibility that she carries for that. But I hear what you're saying, though, about the burden of it's not her sole responsibility. I think that what it should look like is across the board, systemically, a lot of stuff needs to change. But I think the problem is like, do people want it to change? I don't think it's even a case of how we change it. It's, do people even want to change it? And if they don't want to change it, and that's across the board from the people who are in power, you know, and it's for whatever that looks like. I think people in power looks like a lot of things. It doesn't just look like Jeff Bezos. It looks like a lot of stuff.
And look, deans, administrators,
yeah, I mean, right? The
president, board of trustees. Because and I think Howard just announced. I know they did because I reported on the Burton Wire that they're no longer going to allow faculty, staff, or alumni participation on the board of trustees, which is a first. I've never ever heard of that happening.
I've never heard of that.
Which is asking for like a fight. But yeah, no, I think that you can ask because of how you got there, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's fair. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's fair necessarily. Plus, I think academia is such a precarious place that, so I'm not surprised that she's going to be showing up, and before she even gets there, people are like, okay, so we need you to do this, this, and this. I don't think people did that flippantly.
And I think that letter should have also included Ta-Nehisi Coates as well, too.
Yes, absolutely.
He doesn't even have a degree. Now, he don't even have an undergrad degree.
Right.
And is got a tenure track position.
Right.
That letter should have included him too. I agree with you on that. It should have.
Yes. And so I was like, but then it's like the press release has Nikole Hannah-Jones and Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I'm like, okay, but why is the letter directed only towards her?
I have a reason for that, I think, is that because some people have asked me that question too, like, why, I've seen that comment too. Mm-hmm. I would argue that prior to this, because of Imani writes this letter in response to the public pseudonym and to the discourse happening around going where you're celebrated, right? And the complexities of that. I may have missed it. I have not heard Ta-Nehisi speak about the plight of faculty or anybody at all. So there wouldn't have been a response to him. The letter was a response to the current conversation about going where you're celebrated. Right. I don't think it was, you're a rock star, so here you come. We're going to choose you and not him. I think it was Nikole Hannah-Jones had released this amazing 8-page document. Yes. And they were responding to that. Not so much. And I think there would have been, as the editor in me, there might have been a way to think through the gender imbalance in that, even though the response was to her, to maybe include a line, you too, Ta-Nehisi. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it might have been a good little throw on, but he hadn't said anything. But I would imagine that, some of the responsibility there too is with him, is an equal thing, right? You're coming in with a lot of power. You're not immune from carrying some of this burden, especially in a writing program where English professors probably make the least on the campus.
No, right. I agree, and that's a good argument. I would agree with that. Having said that, I do think that because academia is a precarious space, and I would argue also working in places that are like love Black people but don't necessarily love Black women. That's a lot to ask of a person who is not an academic, like who's coming in and running the center. Right. And so I don't think it's unfair necessarily, but I do think it's inappropriate at this particular stage. Although I will say I like that they use the opportunity to help themselves. I think it was because, and I know it was because they had run out of options. It was like, okay, here's another window, here's another opportunity. So, I'm always down for the fight. So I was like, do what you got to do, but I still don't think that that's the answer. So to get back to the other question that you raised, Phill, not the journalism background, because you always have great questions. But the other question is, what does it look like going forward? Like, what are we going to do? Because once this dies down, it's already starting to die down.
Yep.
Cornel West, people were like, we still talking about Cornel? His resignation letter came out. And
that was 2 days ago.
Right. That was like, yeah, there was no resolution. Did y'all? Okay.
Right.
But like, it's an ongoing story until there's a resolution. And then there's a story about the resolution. That's how this works. And so, we have that happening. Then we have, the rest of us. And one of my colleagues and friends, Dr. Kristen Warner, wrote a great piece on Facebook about, what does it mean? Forget the stars. Forget
right.
the people who are bringing $25 million with them to the school, that are bringing all of these kind of resources and all of this. The people who keep the school running and going, right? What are we going to do about academia? Because we are in a crisis, and whether they want to call it that or not is of no consequence. It is what it is. And it's not just Black people who are having these discussions. It's white men having these discussions. It's like everybody is talking about what is happening in academia. And so the TV version is what exists. Most people know, but those who work inside of it, it's just become, more and more insidious in terms of just the hiring of administrators at just ridiculous salaries, the suppression of faculty salaries, the willingness even of administrators to even go to bat for their faculty members who have been paying student loans for 20, 30 years or whatever, when they know that they're paying them these tiny salaries or what have you. The lack of resources that are afforded to lots of people, the unequal distribution of resources when they are given out based on, lots of different things. And then Michelle Gibson asks the question, would this be an issue if she wasn't joining Howard? Have they ascended to a level where they have more scrutiny? That's Hanna Nikole. We're going to go back to that question, Michelle Gibson, but I want to get to this other thing. Like, what does it look like going forward? Those questions. How do we fix it? Can we fix it? Do we have to start all over? Do we have to leave academia? Do we have to ask a bunch of people to retire? Do we have to, protest on campus? Like, what is it going to take?
That's why I asked the question, do people even want to? I mean, there are some people, Black, white, and whatever, right, who are living well, doing fine, doing great, and they're going like, why change it? I mean, it's not affecting me. It's not bothering me. So, I mean, that's what I was saying beforehand. I mean, y'all had me get that out of my chest, and y'all did. But it didn't say that, but it left me out there flapping by myself. But
sorry,
y'all left me out there flapping.
Modeling academia on there.
But what I'm saying is, but there are some people who like it's going fine.
Right.
Why are we changing again? Why are we doing that? Why change what? You need to hustle or whatever.
So for instance, let's say one of the examples in the letter, which I experienced as a faculty member at other institutions, not Goucher, right, was that I sometimes didn't get a contract until October. The semester began in August, right? So, I understand, listening to you, Dr. Cunningham, and Nsenga talking about my personality is just different. So I will acknowledge that I have a different personality, and I'm going to say nope, and take the consequences, because there are consequences. I'm not saying it is a life without consequence. I accept them. So someone who is not me, someone who's a little bit more in the pipeline, someone who's more traditional, what is a person like that to do when they're not getting their contract in September? I think, or really in May or June before the summer starts. So I think it's those little things. Like, because I think that's where the fire is. I don't have a job. I don't have a contract. How do we get people, how do we change the fear, I guess? People sitting around all summer without a contract, knowing that they have a job, right? I think there's so many levels to this that I can't think of what the solution might be, especially when, as you have both said, that people might not be either willing or want to, or might be afraid to say, well, I'm just going to teach until I get my contract. Maybe they'll get it to me before Christmas for the fall semester. People are doing that. It's happening regularly. So is it just at that micro level, getting people to stand up for that much? I can't quite call it.
No, it's good. Donna Hill has some suggestions. Retire some folks. redefine the salaries of administrators and revisit the efficacy of tenure. And also, something that you just said and what I read, from Donna, made me wonder, perhaps we need to fall out of love with this idea of what a Black professor means. Because maybe what it meant, when we were barred from really anything in this country, and we were able to kind of obtain these symbols of status or symbols of excellence, it doesn't translate. The rules have changed, the game has changed. And so, now that you have more women and people of color in these positions, I don't think it's a surprising that you have lower salaries. I don't think it's surprising that, people are fighting you on tuition remission, and now they don't want to give you housing for your kids if they come to the school. In some cases, I don't think it's surprising that people aren't getting raises, but then they're hiring people at 6-figure salaries, some 7-figure salaries. So I don't think it's surprising that as we become more the industry, and I call it an industry because it is an industry, and it's a $1 billion nonprofit. But I think that we should not be surprised that the rules are changing, because those who are in it are changing as well. And so maybe we have to shift our thinking and say, hey, I don't have a contract, so I need to figure out how to start my own business, entrepreneur. I need to make sure I'm on the market and do less for the university and more for myself. That whole self-care thing is not a joke. Professors spend a lot of their time not only teaching, but also counseling, nurturing, advising, talking students down from the cliff. We spent a lot of time outside of our classrooms on stuff, not to mention grading and doing research and all those other things. But maybe I need to pull back and give less, instead of 8 assignments, maybe I give 5 assignments. And
that's a good point.
Put some job applications in elsewhere, or to figure out how I can pivot. But whatever it is, it can't continue the way that it is.
It can't.
And I think that what Black people, unfortunately, are learning, and we constantly learn in this country, is that it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what's behind your name. It doesn't matter what letters you have, how you dress, nose piercing, whatever. It doesn't matter. If you are Black, the rules are different. And there's always someone who is empowered and afraid of whatever it is you're bringing.
Sure.
In place, wherever you go.
Wherever.
And then in our institutions, there are a lot of people who uphold what I call dominant European values. That is their definition of success. They can be Black, maybe they went to a boarding school, whatever, and then they went to an HBCU. It doesn't matter. There are people at all places, Black folks too, who believe what we're told, who believe in these values that really never did apply to us. And the minute that, as E. Franklin Frazier said, and then Mos Def said, as soon as we learn the rules, they change the game.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right. And the idea too that we have to kind of just be at R1 University. So many people said, well, you at the community college now, you can use that as a stepping stone to go to a bigger university. And I'm like, well, why would I want to do? I'm doing good where I am. I mean, it's fine where I am. I mean, I don't see it that way. It took me, I had to work like hell to get this job.
Right. Right now, and this is the idea that you have to be at a Research One. You have to be at 5 HBCUs. I'll go ahead and say it. Somebody talks about HBCUs. We know who the hell you're talking about. And there are over 100. So, and I have met people who are HBCU graduates who refuse to teach at HBCUs. I tried to hire them. I've been a chair 3 times. And they were like, oh no, I'm sorry, I don't work at HBCUs. Even though they were educated and have their degree and they're making their money due to that HBCU. So, and I'm not saying that's always the case. It's exceptional, but it does happen. But I think we really need to be thinking about, yes, what does this look like? What are we willing to do? Those of us who are in academia, those of us who are thinking about academia, those of us who work outside of academia and have influence because of our contributions, financial and otherwise. What are you willing to do to help faculty that are here and our illustrious alumni of these organizations? What are they willing to do to help the faculty who are here and really facing some really tumultuous times? So having said that, thank you everyone for joining us today. We've had a wonderful conversation. If you want to come back and visit, you can see it on this link on this Facebook page, the Burton Wire. Please like us, please subscribe, and join us next week when we will be having another lovely conversation about something important to us, Black people, because we matter. All right. Have a great day.
All right. Take care.